Phil, there's a lot of reports out there. The Eagles are looking at quarterbacks. Wentz today, Lynch tomorrow, earlier in the week, Goff, Hogan from Stanford yesterday. Didn't they just sign 2 quarterbacks for a lot of money?
Yeah, they did. And, it seems a little bit counterintuitive, I guess you could say. But the other way to look at it is, first of all, you have this week, you've had the combine and all that kind of stuff, and you can bring players to your facility to visit. But you have this week between the owners' meetings and when the Novacare complex is open for players, and Doug Peterson can start meeting with guys, talking football with them. Basically, kind of a lull in the schedule, and it's an excellent opportunity for Peterson and Howie Roseman to go around and really get a feel for these guys in person. The various quarterbacks who are going to be available in this draft. That doesn't mean that they're definitely going to take one, especially not at 8 or by moving up to get one. But this is their opportunity to figure that out. Really get some quality time face to face. Watch them throw, see what they can do. Peterson said he doesn't like to go to pro days and that kind of thing. Which I can understand. I was watching Carson Wentz's pro day on NFL Network the other day. If the whole world can watch it on NFL Network, you maybe can't get the work done that you would want to if you're a head coach of a team thinking about bringing that guy into your organization. He likes to work them out personally, and so it's a good fact-finding opportunity for them. There's not much else to be doing this week if you're the Eagles, so it's a good use of their time to kind of decide if one of these guys blows them away. Maybe one of these guys really turns them off and is not a guy they would be interested in. All the various possibilities. But the other hand, the other factor with it is, if you think about Sam Bradford and Chase Daniel, 2 guys they just signed, this is a team that, Jeff Lurie has owned the team for 2 decades now. The first 5 years, Rodney Peete, Bobby Hoying, Ty Detmer, Randall Cunningham at the end of his career, all started games at quarterback. Last 5 years have been kind of like that. But in the 10 years in the middle, Donovan McNabb, they had a franchise quarterback. They won an NFC Championship game 5 times, Super Bowl 1 time. I think there's a feeling with Lurie that's the key. If you get that part taken care of, everything else will go kind of fall into place.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the quarterback position is the key in this league. But Phil, if Sam Bradford plays like he did the final 7 games, and he just plays at that level, doesn't take it up, doesn't go down, are they okay at the quarterback position? Do they need to draft a quarterback?
Yeah, I think they're okay. But the question is, is okay going to be enough to get you, to a Super Bowl and to a championship? And that's a big question. Is Bradford that guy? I mean, I like Bradford and I like what I saw of him at the end of last year. But that was in Chip Kelly's offense, which is, something that only Chip Kelly runs, basically, in the NFL. Bradford has experience in the West Coast style of offense that Peterson's going to implement here in Philadelphia. So there's a chance that this really works out well and that, Bradford takes another step up toward being a franchise-type quarterback. But that's, I guess one way to look at it is, the more shots you have at this, the more arrows you have in the quiver, the better shot you have of finally hitting a bullseye with one of them. So, you're going to pay Bradford a lot this year, and then next year if you keep him. Daniel's making a lot for a backup quarterback, but it's kind of in the middle. And with a rookie contract, you get a guy for a couple of years, 4 or 5 years for a first-round pick. That's an excellent opportunity to kind of have 3 guys at 3 different levels of development, all kind of basically all competing to be that guy. And if you have 3 chances to get that one guy you really need for your franchise, that's better than having 1 chance, or as Eagles have had in some years recently, no chances. So that seems to be what they're trying to do. Again, I don't think it means that they're absolutely going to take a quarterback here with the first round. They wouldn't have gone to see Kevin Hogan if they were absolutely dead set on, a number 1 first-round pick type quarterback. But they're exhausting all their options, finding out everything that they can. And, given the way things have worked out for them at quarterback for the last few years, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Do you advocate them drafting a guy, if one of those guys falls to 8? Now, I think a trade up is a different situation, which I don't agree with. I don't even agree with them taking a guy at 8 because I don't love any of the 3 guys. But, Phil, how about you? If there's one of those 3 guys at 8, do you think it is worth taking that swing that one of those guys turns out to be pretty good. I mean, are they too good? That's my problem. I don't think any one of them is too good to pass on. If a quarterback's there at 8, are any one of those guys too good to pass on?
Yeah, that's the question. And I don't really have that sense right now myself. I mean, Carson Wentz, played at what we would call Division II, basically at North Dakota State. None of these guys are guys you really heard much about through their college careers. Paxton Lynch came to the link and played Temple with Memphis, and Temple beat them. So it's not like you're talking about Andrew Luck here or Robert Griffin III, guys who were really well-known, top-of-the-line college guys who were clearly going to be NFL franchise quarterback type players. That's not what you got in this group of quarterbacks. But the whole point of this week, I think, is for Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman and even Jeff Lurie now to go out there and actually get some time with these guys face to face, see what they can do, get a feel for what kind of capabilities they have, what kind of intellect they have for the game in terms of picking things up, and whether their skill set would fit what Peterson wants to do. And if you get that sense that one of these guys really can be, the guy, and Doug Peterson, one of the things I think Chip Kelly's fundamental mistake, aside from some of his, personality quirks that rub people the wrong way, I think was that he came here and he just wanted to try to win the first year, prove that he could win in the NFL, and he wasn't just a college coach. And he didn't bother with anything like, getting his quarterback or identifying the guy that would be his guy. And it was just, I'll take whoever's here and I'll try to win with them. And he did that and had some success early on. But, at the end of the day, they never really had the quarterback that Chip Kelly would need, to be a serious contender. And 3 years in, trying to get Bradford and seeing that would work was kind of a last-ditch effort there. But I think with Peterson starting his tenure here, every chance you can to give him that quarterback that he needs, it makes sense to do. Again, I don't know. It seems to me that giving Bradford like a quality left tackle or running back or even a defensive player that can help the team win would help Bradford succeed as he's the guy this year. But if you're really smitten with one of these guys, really come to believe in one of these guys, which is what this process is about, then I think any opportunity you have to get that quarterback, you have to do it. I mean, you think about everyone wants to do the Aaron Rodgers move, when the Packers drafted him when they still had Favre back at the time, and it took a couple of years for Rodgers to get to be that player. But if they had gotten Rodgers with the 8th pick in that draft, you still would have thought that was a bargain. They got him like 25th or 24th, whatever it was. A guy that people knew he was a good quarterback and was a good prospect, but nobody knew he was going to be the player that he is. If you can get a guy that you believe can be that kind of quarterback and you have a little time to develop him, I think it's always worth a shot if you think a guy can really be that special.
Phil Sheridan's with us, ESPN.com, NFL Nation, covers the Eagles. Over at ESPN.com, the Eagles' offseason grades, it seems that everybody seems to like what they are doing. I see a grade of A there. Pro Football Focus gave them an A-. However, in the latest power rankings, which, doesn't really have a whole lot of weight, but they didn't move up or down. They stayed in the same spot. So it seems that people still aren't sold that this team got better. Phil, do you think that this team is a better football team today than the team that ended at 7-9 back in December?
I do. I think what happens is, I voted in that poll myself, and I don't know that I moved the Eagles very much in my own ballot because of, and I think it's how other people view it too. I think you look at it and you go, all right, well, Chip Kelly was an interesting and sort of compelling figure as a head coach. But Peterson is just not that guy. I mean, he could be. He could develop into a terrific head coach, and 5 years from now we could be talking about Doug Peterson in hushed tones with tremendous respect and all that kind of stuff. But I think people look at Peterson as kind of a question mark, at least as a head coach, kind of a guy that they're not really sure what to make of him. So you look at that part of it, and a lot of the other changes, they seem like they've lost more good players than they picked up in the last 3 or 4 years. A lot of that was Chip's doing, but in the general sense, I think the team, went 7-9. It just wasn't a very exciting or promising finish for the season for the Eagles. And then you added Doug Peterson as a head coach, as a guy that, again, doesn't have the name recognition of the sort of wow factor that a head coaching hire can sometimes have. So I think it makes sense that they kind of sit there. I think personally, I do think they're better. I think the Jim Schwartz hiring as a defense coordinator, I think that's a tremendous move for them. I think the chance for the defense to actually become a very aggressive, difference-making unit instead of one that's sort of constantly dealing with the fact that they're on the field too much because of the no-huddle offense and all that, and, kind of making enough mistakes to get you beat pretty much every game. I think that's a huge turnaround for the Eagles and a huge chance for them to improve. Personally, though, the other thing is that, Washington was the improbable winner of the NFC East last week. Last season, and so now, they're kind of the favorite, kind of coming back. Everybody kind of thinks the Cowboys season went off the rails because of Tony Romo's injuries. So you're going to get him back if you're the Cowboys. So the Cowboys are probably in the hunt in the NFC East. And of the two coaches that were hired, I think Ben McAdoo is probably a little bit more enticing to people as a Giants' new head coach than Doug Peterson is as the Eagles' head coach. So I think, people look at all that and they kind of go, well, they're probably third or fourth in the division, and Peterson's not a guy that's going to, make anybody say wow. So I think that's probably why there was not a lot of enthusiasm for them in that particular poll. But, that's in March. That's what you have to go on right now. If they go into the season and the defense is as improved as it could be, and the offense is at least functioning at a reasonably high level, which it is what Doug Peterson should be able to do, then they can be a much better team. But I think they're going to have to show that on the field. They're not going to win a lot of headlines this offseason. It's going to take them going out on the field and actually looking like a better team.
Phil, Ezekiel Elliott's name seems to be in almost every mock draft. It seems that he's like the hot name in there at number 8. Do you see that he would be a legitimate option for this team picking in that spot? Because, we've talked, Phil Savage was on the show last week, and he said they moved up to number 8 because they had somebody in mind. When you go up in the draft, it's because you're targeting somebody. Would he be one of the guys you think they're targeting at 8?
Yeah, I think he's a very realistic possibility there. And I think Phil Savage is a very smart guy, and that's generally how it works. The one thing the Eagles did say, and Howie Roseman said it flat out, was they thought there were about 10 guys, 8 or 10 guys that were kind of the top tier in this draft, and then there was a drop-off at that point. So getting into that range guaranteed them at least a shot at one of those guys. Now, if somebody takes a guy you don't think is an elite player, and that makes more, that creates another opportunity for another player to be available to you. So I'm not sure there was one specific player that they absolutely felt that they had to have. So much as if we get to 8, then we're guaranteed to get at least one of the guys we really believe is the difference maker. And I can't imagine that Ezekiel Elliott would not be on their list. He's just he's legitimately, possibly a franchise type running back. And, the people who say, well, you don't take running backs high, and you look at guys that have had careers where, they were drafted high, and even if they were great running backs, they don't win anything. A guy like Adrian Peterson, probably the best running back of his generation, but there's not been a whole lot of team success. But if you get Sam Bradford and Chase Daniel and of those two guys, you believe even one of those guys can be a franchise type quarterback. If Bradford can actually kind of take that next step and be that guy, and you add an elite running back to that equation, then Bradford's better because he's got a running game. The running back has a chance to be successful because you're going to focus on the run at times more than a lot of teams do at this point. Peterson has said he wants to do that. So now you have an elite running back and an elite quarterback. Then you have a formula for some real success. So, yeah, I think Ezekiel Elliott has to be a guy they look at very carefully. And, I still wouldn't be shocked if they took him in the first round and, went for a quarterback in the third round. And that's where a guy like Kevin Hogan would come in. So all these guys are saying who, might not be their pick. That's still valuable to have that information. It was important that they worked out Sam Bradford and spent time with Sam Bradford and got to know him back in the day because they ended up being their quarterback. They didn't have a chance to draft him in 2010, but he's their quarterback now, and they had a handle on him and a and a pretty good feel for him when he came out in the draft. That's part of what you do with quarterbacks every year when the draft rolls around.
Well, sure, it gives the illusion to teams behind you that if one of those quarterbacks are on the board, that you might have interest, and then the phone starts ringing, and who knows what kind of deal you might get at that spot. And I think it's smart of them to do it. It just, I'm hoping, just a armchair GM here, that they wouldn't pick a guy at number 8 at that quarterback spot. But that being said, Phil, I'd like to get your opinion, because another spot in this draft that makes sense at 8 would be a tackle, but they have 2 tackles. So do you take a tackle and play him at guard with the 8th pick in the draft? You're taking a guy and ask him to play a new position. Is that a smart decision?
Yeah, I think it's okay if it's okay in a way, because you're asking him to play a different position and all, but guard compared to tackle is a relatively easier position. So you're asking him, instead of being the left tackle, to spend a year playing, maybe play left guard and eventually move out to tackle. It's not like you're asking him to be a tight end or something. Although Jason Peters started his career as a tight end and became a tackle. But guys can move from guard to tackle as they improve and get comfortable in the league and all that stuff. So that's doable. The whole Jason Peters thing is one of the big questions about this team, really. Here's a guy that's been, as Chip Kelly liked to say, a Hall of Fame caliber player. Has been a rock for them for a long time. But all of a sudden, he's 34. He had back problems last year. I mean, he just wasn't the player that he had been. I don't know what role Chip Kelly's up-tempo offense and the inability to kind of just catch his breath after every play. All of that might have been in the mix there. Running a more standard offense and being able to kind of just do his job without having to do all the up-tempo stuff and everything. That might get Jason Peters another year or two. But at 34, not a lot of guys play tackle too much longer in the NFL. And it's a very, it's kind of position that kind of wears your body down. And it looked like Peters' body was wearing down last year. So getting that guy who could play if Peters can't, but could play guard, for a year just to kind of, learn and get, kind of get his, basically get his legs under him in the NFL, that wouldn't be the worst possible move. It's not as exciting as talking about Ezekiel Elliott or one of these quarterbacks, but there may be the kind of team-building thing that would make a lot of sense. Years from now, you'll be looking back and saying, well, they got Lane Johnson and, with the 4th pick in 2013, and then they added, a left tackle, with the 8th pick in 2016, and, they had their pieces in place. They did that. Andy Reid did that with, when he got here, Trey Thomas was a rookie, had just finished his rookie year, and they signed John Runyon the next year as a free agent. And those 2 guys, were the starting tackles for a team that went to 5 NFC championship teams. And, there's a reason that team was that good for that long. And the quarterback was the number one reason. And the second reason was that the offensive line in front of them was pretty solid the whole way. So, getting those pieces in place is important. And this is an opportunity. That's the trouble with this. With no second-round pick, and now that they moved up to number 8, they have a really good opportunity for one of these plays, one of these positions here. And then it's going to be, until the middle of the 3rd round before they can address another one.
Phil Sheridan's with us, ESPN.com, NFL Nation, of course, covers the Eagles at Sheridan Scribe. Phil, a story came out, NJ.com, that former Eagles front office executive basically said Chip Kelly alienated the scouts almost immediately, that he ripped up all the cards of players he didn't want to draft, that all the scouts basically put all this work in, and then Kelly basically didn't listen to any of them. I guess that would display some dysfunction in the front office, but is that the feeling that you get when this team drafted the last couple of years? And then it goes back to, I guess, this famous Marcus Smith pick that nobody seems to want to take accountability for. But do you start to think whether or not Kelly, in fact, did have some say in that Smith pick?
Yeah, I think he had some say. I mean, the way this whole thing seems like it shook out. I mean, the first year, the 2013 draft with Kelly here, I mean, Howie Roseman ran that draft. Now, this story, it was an interesting story, and there was a lot of candidates who could be that front office guy. I don't know who it is, but yeah, it's very possible that Kelly was trying to make his point. To look at it the other way, Kelly had this whole idea of how you have to have every defensive end has to be a certain size and height and weight, and every position has parameters that you really want to fit. Find players that really fit exactly what you're looking for. That's why a guy like Brandon Boykin was not, was never really had a chance to start here, because he was not tall enough to be a cornerback in Chip Kelly's world. So, he's a decent player, and decent players come in different sizes sometimes, but Kelly wasn't going to have any of that. So, it may have been that, in his first year, he was really trying to kind of drive that message home that, hey, we want, very specific things from each position, and we're not going to even consider guys that don't fit those things. And that could have been kind of what was going on there. And if you're a scout and you spent months, when Andy Reid was a coach, going to college games and evaluating players, looking at hours and hours of film and ranking players, and then the new head coach who's never been in the NFL for a single game comes in and tears up your work and says, these guys don't fit what I'm looking for. That would rub you the wrong way a little bit. And I think there was a dysfunction in the way this organization has been run for the last few years. And Marcus Smith is sort of the poster child now because that the first draft was pretty clearly Howie Roseman running it with Chip Kelly's input as well. Roseman trying to do what Kelly wanted and trying to get guys he wanted. And I got Jelaine Johnson and Zach Ertz and Benny Logan and some pretty good players. The next year's draft is a little less clear. I think Kelly has more input at this point. Roseman's still in charge and making the calls, but no one really seems to kind of acknowledge what happened with the Marcus Smith pick. There were a lot of guys on the board there that would have been, much more useful to the Eagles the last couple of years than Marcus Smith has proven to be. Howie Roseman basically said yes, he was the GM. He takes responsibility for it, but it wasn't a very convincing. And it sounded more like he was just trying to say, yeah, I was the GM, and everything that happened during my watch is on me. And
admirable.
Yeah, I mean, at least trying to look like he's trying to wipe away the Kelly era. Last year's draft, seemed like much more, Kelly's running things, and it wasn't a bad draft necessarily. I mean, Jordan Hicks and Eric Rowe look like pretty good players. Not quite sure about Nelson Aguilar yet, but he still has a chance.
Right.
But it seemed like the Marcus Smith pick was like probably the worst of the top picks in Kelly's 3 years here, and nobody really seems to know exactly why that happened because it got away from what they said was their plan. They seemed like they were drafting for a need. They wanted to get an edge rusher, and they wanted a guy that could get to the quarterback, and they decided Marcus Smith was the best guy there. It wasn't maybe a great edge rusher. There were some cornerbacks. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater and Derek Carr. I get them confused all the time. The Carrs. Those guys are sitting there, Bridgewater and Carr, as quarterbacks. Maybe if they drafted one of those guys, we wouldn't be talking about all this other stuff right now. Maybe Kelly would still be the coach because one of those guys would be emerging as a real quarterback. So, it was a really bad draft that in 2014. Hard to understand exactly how that happens. Unless the dysfunction where Kelly isn't really communicating well, and he's kind of decided Roseman is not his guy, and Roseman's not, communicating well with Kelly at that point. That kind of explains how it came about. But how you let your team kind of get to that point is a little harder to explain.
Well, Phil Sheridan, of course, here on the Sports Bash Wednesdays with Phil, at Sheridan Scribe on Twitter, ESPN.com, NFL Nation for all the Eagles offseason news and notes. The draft, April 28th. The Eagles hold the 8th overall pick. Thank you, Phil.
Enjoy it, Mike.